Welcome to Sharing Stories, Building a Relationship with the Land. My name is Peg Vershawn, and I'm the Director of Programs here at CURE in Montevideo. And it's noon, and we're working to let everyone into the webinar, and we'll begin in just a minute. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see friendly faces popping up on the participant list. You have been muted, and your video is turned off. But if you would like to pose a question to Abbey today, you can use the chat because we have Anne Borgendale from CURE monitoring the chat, as well as Troy Goodnow from University of Minnesota Morris Office of Sustainability. And once we get through the introductory part of the video and questions that Abbey will be answering for us today, you could submit questions and we'll do our best to get to your questions. We'll begin in just a minute. I'm going to, at this point, share my screen and show you a little introductory clip of Abbey in her own environment this summer that was shot by Brian DeVore from Land Stewardship Project, who was working on this project with us. And it'll set the stage for today's webinar that give you an idea a little bit about Abbey herself and what some of her aspirations are related to sharing her story and the relationship she has with the land. So hang on just a second and we'll go to the video.
Hello, my name is Abbey Dickhudt. I use she, her pronouns. Right now we're on Prairie Drifter Farm in Litchfield, Minnesota. This is my second year here. I'm originally from Mankato, Minnesota. Got a big family there. There's 6 of us siblings, niece and a nephew. And a year and a half ago I graduated from University of Minnesota Morris. I did environmental studies and human services. So my interest is really in people and the land, which is how I've gotten to be on this farm. I'm really interested in how land and growing food is healing and can build community and also can learn history and also create something good today. And so here this year we're finishing up in at the end of October, and I'll be going back to Mankato, live with my family. So this is a certified organic vegetable operation that is CSA style, so community share. Oh man. Community share, CSA. What's the A?
Community supported agriculture.
Thank you. I was like, community share.
That works.
This is a community supported agriculture farm. So we have about 150 members between Litchfield and St. Cloud that do an upfront cost. And then they get boxes every week with our produce that we deliver to common pickup sites. And so on this farm, there's sustainable practices used in field management, and compost is applied, and these are all things I'm still learning about, and you're trying to encourage, beneficial pollinators and insects, while also managing some of the pests like potato beetles, and so some of those are required to spray for. So this type of farming is what I have been exposed to. In Morris, I got to see a lot of organic cattle operations and some other vegetables, as well as farms that aren't certified organic but practice sustainably. And sustainably is such a large definition, but essentially trying to do your best to care for the land while producing from it. And those practices can look totally different. And so some of the things I'm learning here is that water management, that soil management, how to balance pests and insects, as well as just you have to get a lot of produce out for your members. And so there's some things where quality changes and, later on there's a lot more disease, so you have to adjust for that. So I feel like I've been learning a lot of lessons of adjustment in this type of farming. But I do have, my mom is from Crookston, Minnesota, and is from a larger scale conventional farm up there. And it's not a history I know too much about, but I still have an uncle up there who helps with sugar beets. And so also trying my best to learn more about that type of farming. But I I'd say this is what I'm most curious about, because I think there's also a lot to learn from the land, and to be able to do that, you have to take care of it. So that's, I guess, what's also getting me into it, is that learning curve I am on.
Glad to have you joining us here today. Today, we're launching a new webinar series called Sharing Stories, Building Relationships with the Land. And today is part 1 of 6. And our goal here is to have a video about every 3 or 4 weeks, and between now and June 1st. And at some point, you'll find more information about the upcoming videos in the chat later. If you're new to the Zoom format, we ask you to go to your upper right corner and do gallery share. And so when Abbey joins us, you'll see both Abbey and I in the video Q&A. This series grew out of a partnership that was produced through our We Are Water West Central Minnesota project this past year. Our goal was to amplify stories of people who are using conservation practices that have important regenerative potential while reducing the impacts of climate change. These practices improve soil health and water quality. They grow deep connections to the land and those who came before them. These stories are from practitioners, people who have their boots on the ground and soil under their fingernails. Together, these storytellers are from different backgrounds, cultures, and generations. We're at a critical moment in time when we need to hear perspectives of path builders who are catalyzing change in themselves and in their communities. Today, we're going to have Abbey join us, and Abbey is an emerging farmer and a recent graduate of the University of Minnesota Morris campus, and has farmed for several years in a couple different community-supported agriculture or CSA businesses. Abbey is investigating the agricultural landscape to see what she can learn in exploring how she can build a livelihood on the land. We'd like to start today and with Abbey, and she's going to give you a little bit more information about herself. Hi, welcome, Abbey.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. So yeah, I'm currently not on that sunny farm in Litchfield anymore, but I'm getting to be in Mankato, Minnesota, where I live with my oldest sister, my 9-year-old nephew, and their scruffy dog named Lily. So I'm grateful to be here today.
So as I alluded to earlier in the introduction, Abbey, you've explored several different kinds of operation situations. And through those opportunities, what do you think that you would like to learn more about?
So I've gotten to work with vegetables and diversified vegetables, and I certainly want to keep learning more about that. I like how many different things you can grow at once in relation to one another. And I think I would always be learning about how to do that. But I'm also curious about how vegetable farms work in relation to any farms with livestock, or if there's any more we can do with like value added products, or kind of working in a wider regional system. How do we also think about like food processors and grocery stores? And so kind of learning more about the system as a whole and how it all connects, while also maybe being grounded on a vegetable farm with some animals.
Great. So as we shared at the beginning, also, you are a recent graduate of the University of Morris. And so I'm really curious what opportunities have been afforded you that have prepared you so far on your journey.
I think I got really lucky when I started my time at Morris, where I was encouraged right away to show up and ask questions and really be present for anything I was interested in. So I got, started right away with the organic gardening club, where I got to learn what it meant to be in relation to other students and staff, while also just trying to figure out how to manage a small plot, and also learned the joy of cooking with others. And then after that, I was lucky to go to Italy for a semester with the group, where one of the days of the week we got to work on the vineyard. So it was really cool to go to a similar climate, but a totally different atmosphere and community, and see, for me, it was cool to see the different challenges that they struggle with there, where even surrounded by beautiful mountains, they struggle with, a monoculture of apple growing and grape growing. And at the same time, getting to be on a farm where they're doing organic grape growing and getting to climb really steep hills as we did that. And then just overall, my time in Morris was awesome, connecting with people and mentors and other friends that I think have been a huge part of encouraging me to keep on with my curiosity wherever that leads me.
Great. So in CSAs, there's probably best practices and things that you need to know to have a successful business. What are some of the things that you've discovered so far in your research, and some of the things that maybe stick out to you a little bit more than others?
I think I got really fortunate to connect with Prairie Drifter Farm with Nick and Joan Olson, because they are always very open in teaching what they've learned from their CSA business. And a huge part of that was they would take a day every couple of months and we would have a educational night of our choice, what we wanted to learn about. And one that was super cool for me to learn about was their holistic management. So, what are their goals as business partners in the farm? And if the farm changes, are they still okay as partners? And from there, they got to just really see, like, these are our values. And then that kind of guides, how do we work in relation to the soil, to the water, and why are we doing this? And I think those were all really grounding questions for me to start to ask of myself, is why am I interested in this? What would it look like if I want to do this with others? What are the critical questions to ask? And so then just like day to day on the farm, then it was always that we were checking in with one another. We were just, feeling good. And then also making sure that we got going right away, and they had really good systems there. So we knew what we had to harvest that day, how to clean it, how to get it packed and prepared and in storage in the refrigerators. So there's always just also a lot of communication in a CSA, especially when Nick and Joan run the farm, but then there were two of us there full time. And so I think that I mentioned the holistic management because that helped everything else get carried through really well. And I felt valued just as an employee there, and that my knowledge could also be uplifted, even if it was just asking questions about the tomato management and such. Yeah.
Really important to have a comfortable environment to be able to have that exchange of ideas and knowledge. So my work at Cure is focused a little bit around the nexus of water and climate and agriculture. And I'm curious to know, like, with your work at the CSA, what were the conversations like about how climate was impacting the business model or your planning for the season and what you were growing, or pest management, whatever? What were those conversations like, or what did you learn about that or observe even?
Yeah. Well, one thing just learning about the CSA model is that it helps to make sure that there's support for the farm, even when there's unexpected climate happenings, like a major storm. They had one a few years before I had gotten there that kind of prevented full production for a week. But since the CSA model kind of has members show up and stick with the farmers through that, it provides a good safety net. But there's also, from my time being there, adjustments in the water level. They have a little stream that runs through, or creek maybe, that runs through their farm. And kind of from there, how that has changed, but also like the increase in pests due to the changing climate is something I'm really interested in and don't understand much about, but would like to, since pests also provide a major challenge. And so a lot of what they had shared was, the changing weather patterns and the changing pests and how to always be adjusting to that. And in the management of that, making sure you have enough produce options in case cabbage loopers eat all of your cabbage. Well, hopefully you have enough, onions to then put in there instead. And it's just that constant adjustment every week that I wasn't ever really having to be the one to make those decisions, but really learning from Joan and Nick as they adjusted to that almost every week too, because I feel like the climate, as that changes and everything that's affected by that, there's a lot of unexpected changes that they always have to roll with.
Sure. So where the farm was located is kind of on the peripheral of like the prairie,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how did wind impact? Like, did you have to think about wind at all?
A little bit. I wouldn't say as much as when I was in Morris. Um, but there wasn't a huge change in elevation around the farm, but there were certainly parts of the farm that were higher up and windier, and the soil was also different on different parts of the farm. So, we'd go to one field and then the other might be a little bit higher, a lot sandier, and get a lot more wind. And so, when we would put, row cover on, which is kind of like a pest deterrent, that would blow away a lot more with the heavy wind, of course. But you would just have to also be watching that a lot more when you were watering it to make sure it was getting even watering, even if the wind was unexpectedly changing. So I think it just affected that control of water and pests.
So you've talked a little bit about water, and you talked about a creek, but can you talk a little bit about the water management system that you worked with there?
Yeah, so they have the house well, and then one more well that they had put in for access near the fields. And then from that second well, we had irrigation pipes and lay flat that bring it out to all three segments of the farm. And due to the water pressure, you can't water everything at once for a long amount of time. So the management of that I was learning was making sure you could time everything and make sure you could get it all watered within the same day or two. But within watering, you also had to be mindful of when to water a certain vegetable and making sure it had enough time to dry off before you either harvested it or it got cool at night. And then there's some vegetables like lettuce that you want to make sure it's not watered too long, otherwise you get dirt splashing up on it and that can create a mold. And so I kind of got to tag along with Nick a lot the past 2 summers and really learn about how long we're watering something and why are we watering, lettuce before we water the carrots. And it also matters when you water something at its stage of development. And so that kind of all led to then a really nice list on a piece of paper of like, okay, after this, we're going to go move these pipes over there and, put on your mud boots and sludge this pipe over there. And so there's a lot of just maneuvering all of those different factors, as well as I know on Nick and Joan's level, they would be managing and making sure to test the water to make sure it was looking good.
Okay. So you talk about you were there for 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Where else have you worked or visited maybe and looked at operations?
Yeah, well, that was my time in Morris and around Montevideo. There's just awesome farms around there. So getting to see Easy Bean Farm and Moonstone, and Toad Hill Farm is a younger CSA farm there. And Prairie Horizons has cattle. And so there's just like a really nice hub of farms there, along with so many more that either do, vegetables or perennials or cattle. And we got to spend a lot of time there, whether directly learning about their practice or just enjoying a dinner and being in company. But I really enjoyed learning about the connections between all the farms and how they supported one another as they maneuvered different challenges. Right.
So we hear a lot about the challenges there are for young aspiring farmers like yourself to get into the business, and whether it's grazing animals, dairy, or CSA. Can you talk a little bit about like what your research has been and what things that you feel are things that you face as you look to your future?
Yeah, I think this past year kind of presented the challenge of if I was willing to work temporary seasons as I continued on. So I was really fortunate at Prairie Drifter where they provide housing. There's a kitchen there, and you get full-time work and paid. So there were a lot of things that made that a really secure place to work. But then the winters got difficult for me, you know, where to live, what to work, what are other places that just want, you know, winter work, but I don't want to just kind of pass my winters all the time. So I also wanted to be invested in winter learning that was also building towards my future goals. And so last winter, after my first season of farming, I was back in Morris and working at the elementary, which was a really great experience, but it was really difficult to leave the school year right before it ended. And also COVID changed that, of course. But I kind of realized I didn't want to be jumping back and forth in that environment. And so this winter, when I moved back to Mankato, I kind of decided to put more time into another skill that hopefully will balance out with farming. And so I picked up a carpentry job in Mankato. And whether or not it's proven good, they decided to take me on with very little experience. And it's been really awesome. We do home remodels and new builds. And I paired up with a really good mentor to kind of bring me into this trade. And the goal with that is that I'd have a skill and a trade to not just support me as I farmed, but also engage my other curiosities of building and getting to, you know, make crafts, because that is a big interest of mine too. And so this summer kind of provides a challenge where I'm no longer able to go back to a farm full time like I did last year, but I still want to figure out how to be on a farm and learning. But that's difficult with a full-time job. And so that's the current challenge, I guess, is how to really be present in what are some really awesome learning environments, these, you know, great farms, but at the same time make sure that there's consistent work for myself and not too chaotic of a housing situation changing every 6 months. And there's other challenges as well for different types of people, but so far that's been the one affecting me most.
Sure. So as you think about next steps, you know, you're in this position thinking about acquiring extra skills, which I think is amazing. You know, you're so adventurous. You're like willing to try anything. But you're actually pretty strategic in like some of these opportunities. You know, you're thinking about them more than just the moment and the need to be able to support yourself. You're thinking like how to gain skills. What are some of the other skills maybe you have identified that you want to maybe, if you could, you know, because I know there's a lot of skills that you probably have identified that you would like more experience in, but like if you picked your top 2 or 3, what would they be?
Yeah, I think the one that is most present in my life and that I referred to is the building skill. And I am really interested in that also for its applications on farms and being able to work with other farms and help build infrastructure. And, you know, that's why I wanted to refer to the Fireweed Community Woodshop in the cities. It's a community workshop essentially that provides different classes. And so for me, also learning about building is also how do we make this resource that's accessible to the community and can be shared on a broad level, because I think that's a critical skill. And then I think the management of a farm is kind of the second skill I want to keep learning how to practice and research about. So there's a farm, Sylvanaqua in Virginia, where they're kind of transforming into a more cooperative business model for a regional food and farm system. And it's something I'm just starting to dive into, but that's kind of the second big thing for me to learn is how do I get into farming, but do it in a way with others. So it's a lot more sustainable and the entire management of a farm doesn't rest on my shoulders alone or just 2 people, but a group. And again, I'm a beginner at learning about it, but that's the other big one.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share that's been on your mind? Or, you know, we've been visiting a lot about the last probably couple weeks about today, the big day, but is there something that you've thought about that we haven't talked about that you feel is really important to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I think just the importance of um, supporting anybody who wants to get into not just farming, but stewardship of the land and how different that looks. I've been really fortunate and lucky to have been able to go to Morris and meet so many supportive mentors and be able to work a couple seasons on a farm and be able to even pose the question of like, what do I do in the winter? What do I do for housing? But in the end, I have found stable jobs and stable housing. And so I think that's also the big thing in all this for me is how do we really support a diverse group of people that want to be on the land or supporting those on the land. And to me, that also involves making sure, we support uh, builders and cheesemakers and pest researchers and, the whole diversity of people that make a farm work well, like even working on Prairie Drifter, they even were awesome at utilizing their resources and friends to say like, I have no idea what this is or why the potato beetle is acting this way. Let me call the U of M lab or, connect with Land Stewardship Project or just really learning how important it is to have such a diverse array of people supporting similar goals,
Yeah, I think that that's really key. And, it brings a couple things to mind for me. Like, my husband and I are also on a small piece of land and we work full-time jobs, but we've been really intentional about growing our own food and raising our own food,
Mm-hmm.
just primarily for ourselves. But it's been really helpful to be able to reach out to our networks when we've had issues with our steers or I'd have to say more with the animals because that's more, I think, a little bit of a challenge for us than the gardening and raising vegetables and things like that. But it's always nice to be able to call someone and say, hey, what do I do about this? Having that network of folks. I think, as a young woman and wanting to do this work, I think there's even a little bit more challenges because people like wonder why, although women are typically associated with like food and land and raising food, they're not typically associated with leading on trying to have a business and run a business. And although you have some great mentors that you've mentioned, I'm curious to know, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? Like, if you had a blank slate and there were no limitations, because we know there are, but like no limitations, what would 5 years from now look like for you, or 10, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere down the road? What would it look like for you if you had a blank canvas and could like tell us what you see?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I would really like to be on a farm and managing a system with other people, as I refer to. And it'd be great to have vegetables and some animals like sheep or goats, however that looks. And part of that vision for me is also just maintaining what I've been lucky to have now, where I can be around good people and support a strong community and be working for a more just future and be eating really good food. And always a part of my vision is a really good wicker rocking chair. Just the idea of being able to be with others, managing a space in good community. But that's where the learning of what does a broader regional system look like? So that might mean I'm on one small pocket of a farm, but it's maybe connected to a larger thing. And that's the part of the vision that's foggy for me is I've gotten to see a couple of farms where it's a family running a farm and it's awesome. Like those are really strong systems. And so now I'm curious as to how does that really grow and adapt to something broader? How do we connect between all of those farms? And so that's where I think I just keep building on what I have now, and I think that'll show itself later how it comes together. But yeah, and somehow then having that carpentry skill be in addition to the farming, whether that means I'm on the farm some of the time and getting to build furniture and houses the other part of the time. I'm not sure. Kind of depends on how I keep getting involved now and getting to learn about it.
Yeah, it does.
Mhm.
It brings to mind something I want to say, but before I do that, I just want to invite the participants. We have about 30 folks joining us today, so I want to thank everybody for joining us today. As we look at the clock, we have about 15 minutes that we can do some Q&A. So if you have some questions, you can type them directly into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them. I just wanted to make one comment to follow up to what you said, Abby, and I think is interesting is, a lot of our farmer friends, our producer friends, they do other things, right? So like some of the folks that you mentioned might have full-time gigs and they farm on the side, or they have a full-time operation during growing season, but in the off season, they're artists, they're potters, they're painters, they're furniture makers, or, there are things that you just, you think traditionally about, or historically about farming. One of the things we're going to examine in the series, and there was always a season for things, right? So there was a season for starting growing, there's a harvesting season, planting, harvesting. And then in the winter, a lot of times there were, in the fall, you would be preserving, after you harvest, and then you cook and you do other things, tell stories. Like winter's a great season for telling stories and doing family focus. And so I think that that's interesting that you've already kind of been thinking about like your talents and how you want to round out um, you spoke earlier about being holistic in your approach and realizing that you really have to think more than just planting and growing, that there's a bigger community, there's a bigger need, and there's a whole calendar of 12 months that has to be utilized, well to be good at what you're doing. Couple questions here. I saw one up here from Eric. He said, "You're young and healthy. How do you deal with healthcare while you're working intermediate jobs, both actually for you and philosophically, just in general?"
Yeah, I think so. The actual piece of healthcare right now, since I'm 23 years old, I'm privileged to still be under my parents. And so that has also been a big piece of letting me work a seasonal job here and there. And it's also the push for me to learn a skill right now that hopefully then can support my own healthcare needs after I'm not able to be with my parents, and something that is a reliable income. And then also just like philosophically taking care of my body in each job I work. I've been grateful for teachers that show me best practices with your body. And even in the wood shop I work at now, they're constantly saying like, trust your intuition. If it doesn't feel good, there's a bunch of different ways we can do this. And I was lucky. It was the same thing as the farm. It was like, take care of yourself. We'll stop if we need to. They would bring out LaCroix sometimes if it was so hot. Like, in that sense, I'm in a workplace that encourages you to take care of your body, recognizing what a important resource it is to really honor and heal. And then also trying to get better, just, daily stretching and, making sure I'm eating good food and sleeping and drinking water, I feel like are always parts of this.
For sure. I
Mhm.
would say that. So Judy is asking us, how would a person get on a list to get produce with a CSA on a regular basis? What does that process look like?
Yeah. If you were curious about joining one this summer, I know Minnesota Grown has a list of CSAs across the state. And that's first important to recognize or connect with the one in your area.
Mhm.
And then from there, if you find a farm or two, they often put out when their CSAs are open. I know a lot of them around the state are open right now. And once you're connected with the farm, some of them have different payment plans available to meet their costs that they have. Yeah, thank you for the link. yeah, and then so once you're connected, you go kind of with the process. And some farms do it where you get produce every week, and then some farms also have the option to do every other week. Some, you just pick up produce at the market. So yeah, it can look different for each farm, but as they've shared the resources, those are good ones to look at.
I might also add that it's not just summer shares. Some of
Mhm.
the area folks around us have winter shares. That might be once a month, and there might be, storage or canning shares. I mean, it's just kind of interesting. That's kind of popped up in our area recently, and been kind of fun to hear about. Troy asks us, why did you want to do this agriculture work? What about agriculture motivated you?
I grew up on a small hobby farm in Mankato, and in the video I mentioned there's six of my siblings, or there's six of us, and so I grew up being outside, digging in the dirt, loving it, and I think I just learned in high school and college that you could keep doing that, and that it's a way. For me, it makes me feel really grounded in all the different changes in our world. And as I've mentioned too, like the food and people are a huge part of that. But I also see being a part of a healthier agriculture system as also creating a healthier community and future. I think we have a lot of learning and healing to do in our communities and in our country around the intersections with agriculture, land removal and what we're doing with water now. And so to me, it's also access to those questions and resources of like, oh yeah, how do we look at our past land and labor intersections and learn from that, and take leadership from people who are most affected by our systems that have displaced them. So for me, it's very personal, where it's really grounding and fun, but it's also on a broader community and country level of building a better future from the ground up, I guess.
For sure. We also have another fun question. Want to know your top favorite 5 vegetables?
Well, I love carrots because they have a lot of fun shapes as they come out of the ground, and there's a bunch of different colors and kinds. And I love onions. Um, I think garlic is amazing because you get the good curly scapes, and then you get the garlic, and then you can plant it again if you want. So let's see: carrots, onions, garlic. I love tomatoes, and I think there's a world of tomatoes to get to know. Um, and then I'd say potatoes, just because I think they're also a fan favorite, so it's fun to be able to learn how to grow them.
Okay, well, so um, Kate is asking, what are your favorite meals to prepare?
I love preparing sauces, tomato sauce, and you can make soup or pizza with any of that. And then I also love sandwiches. I love being able to make a really good BLT in the sandwich with like the best lettuce and tomatoes, and put garlic in the mayonnaise. And anything with other people too is really fun. I do love cookies too, but I guess you could put zucchini and stuff in cookies sometimes.
Or carrots,
Or carrots.
or nuts, or there's lots of things you can grow that can go into cookies.
Very true.
For sure. Let me see if there's any other questions here. So, farming with food sounds very hard and scientific. Can you tell us a little bit more on the science? I mean, you talked a little bit about learning about watering, but what are the kinds of things? It's funny, I have teenagers right now, and they're doing homework assignments, and they're like, we never will use this ever again in our whole lives. Why do we have to learn this? And their dad and I are constantly, trying to explain to them, they will be using this science and this physics and this chemistry, algebra, geometry. What sticks out and is most present for you right now when I like make that statement? Like, what about science did you learn growing up that you never thought you'd use, but you use now?
Yeah. There were two that stand out for me where I know I have to learn more about it, even if I'm new to it. But the soil health, and Joan had us help just collect a couple samples before the end of the season to get sent in and look at what inputs and minerals would be needed. You know, how disease later would come from the soil and what is missing or what there's too much of. And so that was one part to keep learning on, is how to balance what's in your soil, whether with like minerals or a different crop or a cover crop. And then the second one was working in the high tunnel with the tomatoes. They were affected, you know, of course they're affected by how much sun they get, and if you get too much heat, and it's an enclosed system, even if you can roll up the sides. And so at some part of the season you put a shade cloth on to prevent how much sun it's getting, but then you're also having to balance it with the soil. And to me, the high tunnel management of tomatoes is a whole science equation in itself that I will admit I didn't understand all of the parts of it, even if Joan was really good at pointing out, like, well, we're probably, you know, we're seeing this disease because of how this is influencing that mineral in the soil, or making sure that they get compost on there. And so I think both of those examples are just trying to figure out from the outcome what next time different inputs you need, which I guess is kind of like a science equation. But yeah, I think science was never my strong suit either. So I always get a little bit nervous talking about that. It's like, do I understand the science of it? Do I not? And then as I get to be involved in the process of, say, collecting a soil sample and reading the output, it starts to click a little bit more of like, okay, I see it, and I see what we did, how that impacted it. So for me, it's kind of getting to also start learning that application of science that is there all the time. And I'm feeling like another student in it whenever I show up.
That's great. Well, one of the things that I just really appreciate about you, Abby, is your curiosity and your self-motivation, because that isn't always present in young people today. You know, you seem to be a giver and very curious, and I love that about you. And I just want to thank you for your time and your willingness to be one of those new faces, because part of this project that we're working on really is to lift up people that are doing this work, or that are curious about this work, or motivated to learn more about this work, right? And so we appreciate you for being vulnerable and engaging with us on this. And want to thank everyone for joining us today. We've had about 30 folks that have been on with us live. Just want to tell you a few more things about the series. So as I mentioned, we're featuring folks from around the region. There's 6 folks in the series between now and June 1st, and we're working on getting those up. And you can find information about the upcoming series on the CURE website. LSP, Land Stewardship Project, will also have the information out, as well as the We Are Water West Central Minnesota, both on the websites and Facebook. So I encourage you to go and save dates so you can learn more about other amazing people and what they're doing. I also wanted to let you know that this work wouldn't be possible without a few of our partners. Troy Goodnow from the Office of Sustainability at the University of Minnesota Morris campus, Judy Johnson from Stevens County Soil and Water Conservation District, Brian DeVore shot the video footage for us that we use in the introductory clips for all of our participants. Anne Borgendale at CURE did a lot of the video editing for us. Robin Moore from Land Stewardship Project. And then we received some seed funding from the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships through the University of Minnesota Extensions Program. And so just want to lift those folks up and thank them for making this possible. And our next video webinar will be on Tuesday, March 9th, and that will be with Brian Simon. And he's at Lakeside Prairie Farm up in the Barrett area. So he's going to talk about the intersections of water, prairie, and raising and grazing animals on the landscape, and the operation that he and his wife Jessie do there. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. And we're going to have this recorded, and Anne's going to package it in such a way that you'll be able to access it later if you'd like to use it. Share it with your friends. It'll be available for other folks to watch at any time. And it will reside on Cure's YouTube website. And so if you want more information about how to access it, feel free to reach out to me here at Cure, peg@cureriver.org, or contact somebody you've seen in this video today or on the presentation, and we'll get that information out to you. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you on March 9th. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.